is one of the co-owners at Tejas Yoga. For those who don't know, Tejas Yoga is located at 141 West Jackson Boulevard, Suite 750, Chicago, Illinois. So you can find them there. Their contact info, their email is info@tejayogachicago.com. Again, that's info@tejayoga.com. And if you want more information, you can find Jim at the Grappling Yogi on Instagram. And you could also find him at Yoga for Grapplers on Instagram. So a couple spots where you can find him. And for Jim's viewers that kind of don't know who I am and why we're talking, me and Jim have been training at Brazil 021 Chicago for over 10 years. I know you're probably closer to 15, and I'm over 10, and we met there. I was a white belt. I think you were a blue belt at the time, and that's how we kind of got started in this. And at first, I didn't even know you did yoga or were a yoga instructor, and until I got to know you a little better. And Jim is currently a black belt now, and I'm a brown belt. So we're moving on up over the years, and we've been training for a while together. And that's kind of why I wanted to talk to Jim. Jim has he kind of crosses over with his yoga a little bit. I think it's not just you kind of present it where kind of anybody can do yoga. And so the yoga for grapplers and just yoga for, just average people in general. So we'll kind of get to the yoga for grapplers and just that specific stuff. But just to start, just explain a little bit about Tejas yoga. And I saw kind of on your website, you talk about the essence of yoga and Tejas style of yoga. So could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on, JT.
Yeah, no problem.
And thank you for pronouncing Tejas correctly, because it's for those of you who aren't seeing it right now, it's spelled Tejas. So a lot of people, we're more used to Spanish here in the US. So when you see that, people will pronounce it Tejas. And
Yes,
Tejas is
Tejas.
how you say Texas in Spanish. So, but yoga obviously comes from India, and the ancient language of yoga is Sanskrit. And in Sanskrit, you actually pronounce the hard J sound. And Tejas means illumination or radiance, or even the subtle essence of fire. And it has a pretty important place in the yoga philosophy. So that's why we call Tejas Yoga. And I do want to say too, I just realized, I'm obviously here in my condo here in Chicago, and I've got some guys out on our terrace working on that. So they might be coming in here, and there might be a little break in the action.
Yeah, no problem.
So I'll try to keep that as minimal as possible.
No problem.
So and just sticking a little bit with the idea of our studio, Tejas Yoga is a studio we opened about almost about 15 years ago now. And we moved around a little bit in this area of Chicago. We were in the South Loop area first, and just because of rent and leases and prices and things, we moved around a little bit different spaces. We're now in, as you said, on 141 West Jackson, which is the Board of Trade building. It's one of the original skyscrapers in Chicago. It's a super iconic building, and we just got a really good lease there. So we moved there. It's a little bit out of the neighborhood we began in, but still, it's very centrally located now in Chicago. And our thing that we do is we opened the studio. My friend James and I opened the studio 15 years ago because we didn't see a lot of yoga studios in Chicago that were really promoting what we believe is a well-rounded approach to yoga. So not only the physical poses people do, but also breathing and meditation, and the more I guess subtle elements of yoga and philosophical views that most studios don't offer. So that's what we did, and that's what we've been doing for the last 15 years. And I guess I'll just keep going, because you didn't ask me this yet, but I'm sure you're going to ask me. I got into yoga because of low back pain.
Yes.
I grew up wrestling quite a bit. I wrestled in grade school, high school, and a little bit in college too.
Did you
And
did you wrestle like Glenbrook North also? Because I see you go back and do some stuff with Glenbrook North.
no,
Okay.
it's funny. I just know the some teachers at the Glenbrook high schools, and they
Glenbrook.
bring me in. Yeah, they bring me in a couple times a year to do just like meditation sessions for their teachers on like. So like we have a wellness program for the teachers there. So I go in there a couple times a year and just do meditations, little
Mhm.
seminars for them. But
But
anyway, I grew up.
wrestling was like your first sport then, wrestling.
Oh yeah, yeah. Wrestling was like my childhood and teenage years and early 20s. It's what me and my friends did.
Mm,
I was lucky enough to be in a bunch of really good teams in grade school. I was on a couple different state championship teams in high school, a couple of different state championship teams. I went to a junior college to wrestle. They were national champions in junior college for the few years I was around before and after I was there. So I was lucky enough to be on some really, really good wrestling teams. A lot of my old friends are wrestling coaches. One is in Paris right now at the Olympics. He's got five guys wrestling in the Olympics.
oh, awesome.
So yeah, I wrestling was like my youth. Really, we were really into it. But as a result, and obviously lifting weights goes along with that quite a bit too. As a result, I had some low back pain by the time I was
Mm,
like 25 or so. And one of my old wrestling friends was going through physical therapy school at the time, actually at UIC, right where you live.
mm,
And he does some test on me, and he's like, "Man, you really kind of stiff for our age." Again, we were like 25. And he's like, "You need to work on your mobility, otherwise you're gonna have a lot of problems as we get older." So I'm like, "All right." So at the time, I was living in Lakeview, and I passed by this place every day. It was actually a martial arts school called the Peace School, some kind of Korean martial art that I don't know much about, but I know they offered a yoga class once a week, like an
mm,
introduction to yoga class. So I figured I'd go to it, and I should say too, at the time I was actually working on the trading floor at the Board of Trade. Um, so if you know anything about those kind of people that work down there, like they really like to go out and have fun, especially on the weekends. Like oftentimes right after work Friday, everyone just goes right to the bar. So
mm.
anyway, this intro yoga class I was starting was on Saturday mornings, like 8 a.m. on Saturday morning. So I'm a 25-year-old guy working at this Board of Trade where people are known to be big partiers, and an 8 a.m. Saturday morning class. So I remember purposely I wouldn't go out drinking Friday after work. I get to sleep early. I go this early morning Saturday class, and I remember after the first one, I left feeling like $1,000,000. That felt
Mm.
fantastic. So I did it for a month or so, and then it wasn't really a habit yet. So I stopped going. And throughout the next few years, I would kind of go off and on. I would remember, oh yeah, I feel so good when I go to yoga. So I'd go to yoga for once or twice a week, then I'd forget. But after a few years, I found some teachers in a studio that was I really connected with. So
Mhm.
I started going. Started going a couple times a week. Then after a few months, it was every day. And then that was it. That was like in the year 2000. I think the year 2000. And then I was just there so much. They told me at some point, you're here so much, you got to start teaching.
Yeah.
And that's how I got into it.
And that started the whole journey. That's fantastic. Yeah. And it, from like wrestlers and grappling point of view, it's tough on the body. And I'm 48 years old. I've never had any serious injuries, but I definitely believe you have to do some kind of mobility, stretching, and take care of your body. You can't just completely beat it up. But I think you can definitely, grapple and do jujitsu at an older age, but you also have to be mindful of your body and how different it is when you get older and what you can and can't do. And I think yoga is a great complement to any of that.
Yeah, for sure. I so for a good 12, 13 years, all I did was yoga. I had yoga friends. I read yoga books. I went to yoga things on weekends. Like that's all I did. But at some point, I started missing wrestling. I really missed what the camaraderie you get when you try to beat up your friends.
Hmm.
So then that's how I started in jujitsu, and that's how I had some of my old friends. In fact, the friend that is in Paris right now coaching his guys, he knew Andre and Hannette, our professors,
Okay.
from helping. He helped Hannette train for her ADCC medals, which are tournaments when she went to ADC, because it's
Mm.
ADCC is a lot of wrestling.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
so he helped train her wrestling aspect for the ADCC championships. So anyway, I really missed that kind of stuff. So then he directed me to Andre Hannette, and so early on, as I was getting back into it, I realized like, oh yeah, this is what it feels like to be in a grappler's body. It's
Hmm.
really hard on the body. So I knew right away, like I had some good ideas anyway on how to incorporate some the things that I've learned throughout all those years of really getting into yoga into helping a grappler's body stay healthy. And I like to say, and that's why I started Yoga for Grapplers, my little side project, because I know what it's like to be in a grappler's body. I know the areas that are
Right.
going to get beat up, and the areas that you need a little more mobility, you need a little more core strength, you need more balance to not necessarily make you better at jujitsu, because you get better at jujitsu by practicing jujitsu, right?
Mhm.
But the injuries come along with it. So my idea is I'm going to help you indirectly get better at your grappling art
Right.
because I'm going to help you stay healthy. Because when you get hurt, you got to spend time off the mat, right? You don't get to train as much. I want to help people stay healthy so they can stay on the mat more, doing what they love to do.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And for, somebody like me who probably wouldn't, even though full disclosure, my wife was a yoga instructor and she still practices yoga. So that kind of introduced me to some yoga classes, which I've taken, and yoga is fantastic and I enjoy it. But for me, I think it might be, or just your average like jujitsu practitioner or wrestler, maybe they'd be a little more intimidated to maybe take a yoga class. But when you present it for yoga for grapplers, I think they might be like, well, this is a little more specific to us. So do you really change a lot and do different stretches and mobility stuff for the actual grappling for the
I
grapplers
do,
that show up? Yeah.
and it's funny that you say that they'll be intimidated. Boy, the very first Yoga for Grapplers seminar I did, I had a really good turnout. There were like 20 some guys and some girls. And these big, tough guys, they came in my yoga studio and they seemed so scared. It was the weirdest thing ever. I'm
Yeah.
like, what are you guys scared about? Like, no one's gonna beat you up here, that's for sure. But
Right.
there, and I remember that, that's one reason I think more guys, more men aren't into yoga here in the US because guys, we like to look cool in front of ladies, even now we're trying to pick anyone up or anything like that. But it just the way we're raised, like it's just so ingrained in our subconscious that like you gotta look
Hmm.
cool in front of the ladies. So guys don't like to look bad when they know there's gonna be a lot of girls are watching. So
Yeah.
it scares them and they feel kind of dumb. And it's just when you're in different situations than you're used to, you feel kind of awkward and nervous. So that does happen. But yeah, my yoga for what I really like to do for yoga for grapplers is go to an academy that has instead of a yoga studio, get the yoga studios. I want to go to your academy or someone's academy where we have mats
So
because
yeah,
a lot of
you
things.
bring it to their environment, not the other way around. Yes.
Yeah, that's what I like to do. For a while, I did it at our studio, but then I'm like, yeah, it's hard to get these guys and these ladies out of the academy and over to the yoga studio. So I'll just go to them, and then there's more freedom to move around. You're not stuck on this little yoga mat. I can incorporate more movements that are very similar to jujitsu moves that we do or grappling type moves.
Mhm.
And afterward or before, we can do a little open mat. You can roll around a little bit, have fun. That's what we like to do. So that's what I really enjoy is going to academies and doing some seminars that focus on either the first seminar I usually do when I go someplace new is keeping your low back healthy low
Mhm.
back, because that's the first area that most people have pain and that are really into grappling. Wrestlers and jujitsu and any kind of grappling is low back pain.
Right.
So I like to do things that help keep them healthy. Now, going back to the part of your question where you said, do I teach things differently? I do a little bit, but most people for low back anyway, most people have low back pain for similar reasons. We sit too much in chairs. We sit too much
Mhm.
in a chair at work, then you chair in the car, then chair when you're eating dinner, then if you're going to grapple, you're most of the time kind of hunched over like you're in a chair. So we do that too much. So I try to do things for everyone, especially grapplers, to get more hip extension
Yes.
and strengthen more glutes and strengthen the muscles in your low back as well, of course, and do things like that. So it's similar, but I again know more what's like the feeling in a grappler's body than if I wasn't into jujitsu. So I feel I do have that edge where I can help people who like to grapple be more efficient with their training, be more efficient with
Yeah.
working little things in to their warm ups, to their cool downs, or whatever, and kind of part of your training to help keep you more mobile and pain free.
Yeah, I absolutely. And that kind of leads me a little bit to let's talk about breath work because for a grappler, breathing is extremely important. So in jujitsu all the time, When you're training, you'll hear people say, "Hey, remember to breathe," because, we forget to breathe. We get in these kind of intense situations, especially when you're newer on the mat, you're a white belt or, a blue belt, you haven't been
Yeah,
training
sure.
a long time. The breath work is very important. And I know it's a very big part of, how you teach yoga. So could you explain the breath work a little bit?
Yeah, sure. And as I mentioned earlier, we opened the studio, our yoga studio years ago because there weren't a lot of places that really emphasize breathwork and meditation the way,
Mhm.
traditionally you would in yoga.
Right.
So I've always really been really into that part of it. That is, the quickest way to manage your energy levels and really alter your consciousness is through your breathing.
Mhm.
And that's helpful for everyone, including people who are grappling. And I think that what I really, and again, the way I teach yoga is very much, I might call it breath centric. Even when we're doing the physical movements and postures, it's really emphasizing the breath as much as the movement and pose, if not more. Uh, so in one of my normal classes, it's always my job, I think, is to help people have a very conscious use of your breath. And you could
Mhm.
even say a skillful use of your breath, a skillful use of your breath to help um, manage your energy levels in an appropriate way and in the way that an effective way, let's say, for what you're trying to do.
Mhm.
Generally speaking, if you want to make yourself more alert, more energized, quick, short breathing is the way to do it. If you want to calm down the nervous system down, make it more focused, slowing down the breath. Now, oftentimes slowing down the breath is the way to go, but there are times also that you want to do some short, quick breaths to get yourself more alert and more ready for action, let's say.
Mhm.
And I find this really helpful that in when you're sparring to do sure. And I saw a video years ago on Hickson Gracie talking about this because he's really big into
Yeah.
breathing too, the Gracies in general. And this is super effective. Doing short, quick exhales through your mouth. Oftentimes that reminds you to breathe, just to breathe. Period. Usually, when people get anxious or they're uncomfortable, the first thing they'll do is take a deep breath in and hold the breath in.
Right.
And when people talk about, oh, make sure to breathe, take a deep breath. Usually taking a deep breath isn't the problem. Usually exhaling is the problem. You need to focus
Okay.
on more on exhale and exhaling all the breath out because the inhale will come in naturally. So that's
Right.
oftentimes the problem is focusing a little more on exhale,
Okay.
especially when you're getting anxious or when you're getting in a flurry because it's natural tendency to take a breath in and hold it, which isn't going to help you.
Right. Yeah. The exhale is just as important. And that's funny you brought that up because I was watching some of your YouTube stuff last night and checking you out. And you talked about Hicks and Gracie. And I don't know the name of it. So, don't hate me for saying this, but you do, it's almost like a stomach roll where you roll
Yeah,
your
yeah. It's
stomach
kind of
in
Yeah, it's a good way to describe it. It's called Nauli
okay.
in yoga. Yeah, it's and I'm sure everyone basically in Jiu Jitsu has seen that video by now of Hickson doing
Mm.
all this work. It's a really good
Jim
the
Bennett does it
yogis.
too. He looks fantastic doing it too.
Thank you. It's funny that you saw me on YouTube too. My YouTube, our studio and my own personal YouTube game is weak. I forget about YouTube all the time. I post more things
Mm.
on Instagram. I'll try to put more things on YouTube. But anyway, the ancient yogis believe that that was a really good way to detoxify the organs and keep your digestive fire really strong.
Okay.
That's a little more of an esoteric understanding of it, and I'm not, you can't really prove that it helps to detox your organs.
Mm.
But what I do know is doing those kinds of things for sure strengthens your core, including the core of your core, if you will, your diaphragm, which is the main muscle you breathe with. Most people's
Right.
diaphragms don't move that well to have an efficient use of your breath. So that's one benefit of doing the things with your stomach that we're talking about now is it helps to stretch and strengthen the main muscle you breathe with.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And just to switch gears a little, because we're talking about grappling and, I'm a police officer. So I taken jujitsu. I'm promoting jujitsu and the benefits of, jujitsu for law enforcement officers. I think, they should train. We need to be skillful in grappling for our, encounters on the street, but also, the longer I've worked as a police officer and working with more veteran officers and seeing them towards the end of their career, I've noticed, a few things that are big. Low back pain. We have major hip problems, um, mainly from probably our duty belts, the weight we carry, and knee issues also. A lot of sitting in the cars with all this weight on us, these heavy duty belts, all this gear on us. So not only is, I think yoga important for, grapplers, but just, first responders, law enforcement in general, and all the gear we have. And, you know, could you kind of talk about, just your average police officer, some of the benefits they can get just coming to Tejas Yoga and trying a class?
Yeah, and I've got some good friends. They're police officers. They were here in the South Loop. I'm not sure where they are now. I've got some friends that used to be here in the South Loop, my neighborhood, that are police
Mhm.
officers. And they were, when we had our studio in the South Loop, they would come by pretty often, and we're happy to give first responders a nice discount at Tejas Yoga.
Okay, great.
One of them, actually, his name is Dan Jarvis. I haven't spoken to him lately, but last I talked to him, he was not going to be on the stream, or he was going to be at the academy and teaching yoga, because he's actually a certified yoga teacher.
You know what? He is, and I met him actually. And
Okay, nice guy, right?
yeah, very nice guy. He's teaching, yoga for first responders, and they have incorporated into the Chicago Police Department. They're offering it, and I did take a yoga class with him, and it's like an in-service class. And I mentioned your name because you're the big yogi guy I know, and he goes, "Oh, I know Jim Bennitt," and he said he's taking your classes and stuff like that. Yeah, so small
Yeah,
world,
yeah,
yes. So
yeah. It's great.
it's kind of growing in the law enforcement community too. Just the many benefits for law enforcement and first responders. It's, the stress level, the breathing. Throughout our day, we have kind of like, I'd say, these highs and lows of adrenaline spikes, and then nothing's going on, adrenaline spikes and nothing's going on. So, I believe, just learning to breathe, relax, stay calm, and all those benefits that, yoga can provide. And, on top of the physical aspects of, being a first responder, the benefits of yoga, I'm sure are fantastic. So,
Yeah, for sure. There's a thing called yoga nidra, which you may have heard of before, which
mhm.
means yoga sleep, and it's
Mhm.
not literal sleep, but it's basically a guided meditation while you're on your back in corpse pose or shavasana, and it's been shown to have really great benefits for vets coming back from the war from overseas who have
Mhm.
PTSD. They've done actually quite a bit of research. I forget what hospital and what university, but they've done some good research that shows how much this approach, again, like basically a guided relaxation and meditation while you're on your back, helps with PTSD. And um, I'm sure there's many police officers who have something close to
Sure,
PTSD,
sure. Yes.
something close to it anyway. Maybe it's not called that, but I'm sure that could be super helpful in helping first responders deal with that kind of stress that you deal with,
Yeah,
that you're
absolutely.
dealt.
And just even basic stress and just life stress in general. I think you need to have, I'm a big believer in having healthy outlets for stuff. I train jujitsu because, I got into it just for the grappling aspect, but there's so much more, the mental health aspect, the physical health, and I'm sure yoga is the same way. You need to have, a healthy outlet, whether that be grappling or cycling or yoga. And but I think you get a lot of benefits, from yoga and being a first responder that could really help you out.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, mostly the breathing part. Then the poses are fine too. And going back to the way I teach yoga for grapplers versus like a normal yoga class,
Mhm.
my approach, just because not only for helping grapplers, but also I've just learned a lot more about the anatomy throughout the years from my friends who are physical therapists and chiropractors. My approach is focusing more on mobility as opposed to just flexibility. And I think a lot of yoga classes these days, unfortunately, just focus on flexibility. The
Mhm.
difference being flexibility is taking a joint through a passive end range of motion, where mobility means you're going through a range of motion with control. So mobility implies an element of strength that just flexibility does not have. So that's one way that I approach the physical practice of yoga, the physical part of yoga. We're doing a lot more active stretching where we're working with joints and taking them through ranges of motion slowly with control. So you have both strength and flexibility. And that's also super important when talking about things like low back pain and knee pain. A lot of times knee pain is caused from a lack of hip mobility. And that's all my classes, no matter if I'm teaching first responders or jiu-jitsu practitioners or Olympic wrestlers. I'm trying to the things I always focus on in the back of my head anyways: hip mobility, core strength, and balance. Even if I'm teaching an 85-year-old person, if you keep working on your hip mobility, core strength, and balance, you're gonna be healthy. It's gonna help you do everything you do in life better and more efficiently and with more grace, and fluidity, as opposed to just talking about flexibility or just talking about strength.
Right. Yeah. And some people get like a nagging injury somewhere and they think it's just that point. And where you're saying it more ties together with kind of everything in your body. And when you work on these systems together, you don't have these little nagging injuries here or there because you're kind of working on your whole system together and strengthening it. Right.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it.
Okay. Yeah. Cause, on your website, it says, you incorporate functional movement, mobility exercises, breath work, and meditation. And it says when you take a class from Jim, expect to sweat a little, breathe a lot, and feel a sense of inner peace. So I think that's a great statement. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's my elevator speech on how my approach to yoga.
Yeah. And say I'm a first responder or I'm in jiu-jitsu, a grappler, and, I'm looking to just drop in for a class. Are there where you would have to sign up right away, or can you just pay a drop-in fee, and just kind of explain that a little bit?
You can pay a drop-in fee, but you should let us know in advance because,
Okay.
because of COVID, it actually helped us in some weird ways. It got everyone in the habit of pre-registering. So we want to have a good idea of who's coming to class, just so first of all, we have enough space, and we're prepared to teach everyone to the best ability. So for sure, pre-register. You can go on our website, and it's pretty easy to find the class schedule. Pre-register before you show up, and you can, if it's your first time, there's a $10 first time fee, which is a huge discount. After that, then let us know you're a first responder, and we'll give you a certain membership that will give you a nice discount every time you buy a single class or a series of classes.
Okay, great. And as far as like because I know you're back in jiu-jitsu, you train. So kind of what's your balance between, how many classes do you take of jiu-jitsu and how many, I know you're teaching and doing yoga all day, but kind of what's your jiu-jitsu looking like now?
Yeah, these days I'm usually twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week.
Sure.
That's kind of like my whole journey in jiu-jitsu has kind of been 2 or 3 times a week. When I first started, it was twice a week for a while. Then I was going to 3 times a week quite a bit. Now it's kind of just for scheduling. It's 2 or 3 times a week, at least twice though. And that's just, mostly because of just scheduling. But I do actually like a day in between training because, usually when we're training, we're sparring too.
Yeah.
So a day off in between is pretty good for the old 53-year-old body now.
Yes. Yeah.
So at least a couple of times a week, grappling somehow. And then, because I'm just still so active in teaching, and I'm still, maybe not Sundays, probably 6 days a week, I'm doing quite a bit of yoga still. At least an hour, between an hour, 3 hours, something like that.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic.
I also I have been working in, and as I mentioned earlier, my yoga practice and teaching is working on strength and mobility. So I'm doing things that are, more strengthening, but also a couple times a week now, I've been getting into a gym and doing some kind of resistance training, some kind of weights, or, doing something else just because, probably because it's just different and it's interesting again. I lifted weights so much in my youth that I was really sick of it for a long time. But these days, I'm really interested in a lot of different things people are doing in gyms. Not just like this bench press and squat. Like they're doing things with kettlebells. They're finding different ways of working our bodies in intelligent ways. Pushing the sled. You ever push a
Sure.
sled?
Yeah.
Man, when I first saw people do that, I'm like, that looks like torture. I would never do that. It is kind of torture, but I like doing it
But yeah.
in a
And now
sick
you're
kind of
doing
way.
it. Yeah.
I'm doing it now. It really, because yoga for sure does not get your heart rate up as much as you want it to for like an actual workout. And
Right.
jujitsu does a little bit, but there's here and there. Like it's not working that hard the whole time.
Right.
But things like pushing a sled and getting into lifting some weights and doing things like that gets your heart rate up, man. So I've been incorporating a little bit strength training these days too in the gym. It's nice I mentioned it's nice to do different things. So you can't always do the same thing. Your
Yeah.
body
True.
gets used to it, and at some point, it's not as productive as it once was. So it's good to mix it up.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. And yeah, you got to mix up your training a little bit and not be afraid to try new things and venture out a little bit. And it's all kind of being in that kind of healthy lifestyle. That's one great thing about, jujitsu gyms. You find people that, do yoga, do kettlebells, there's weightlifters, there's boxers, there's Muay Thai guys. So it's nice because you get to meet all these kind of different people and they're always like, hey, come to my gym and check this out too. So it's a nice kind of easy way to meet people that are doing other things to stay healthy and and stay productive and take care of themselves. And the older I get and the more kind of nagging injuries I get, I'm always kind of leaning more towards yoga. The nice thing is I have my wife at home and, she can help me stretch or, correct my terrible posture, which is usually, one of my issues and how to stand up properly and things like that. So I do have one of those benefits of having a yoga instructor here to help me out a little bit. So it's
And you may have seen too that recently I've been getting into ice baths a little bit. It's another
yes.
thing that 10 years ago, our friend, when a little bit over 10 years ago when I started jujitsu, our friend Kevin Jamali, he was like
Mm,
really into Wim Hof and really into ice baths. I'm like, man, you're crazy. I'm never going to do that. Sure enough, 10 years later, I kind of like it. It's another thing like the pushing the
yeah.
sled. It's kind of like torture, but I kind of like it too. And afterward, I feel pretty good, man. It's easy to find research these days that people have done that show all the benefits of these cold plunges, and the
Yeah, that's
the
true.
cold, the contrast of cold and the hot and everything. So I've been doing that
Right.
a little bit too. I like throwing that in there when I have time to mix it up.
No, that's great. That's great. So, yeah, so just to kind of wrap up here, I'm talking to Jim Bennitt with Tejas Yoga, and you can check him out. He's here in Chicago at 141 West Jackson, Suite 750, Chicago, Illinois. You can email him at info@tejayoga.com, and you can find him on Instagram at The Grappling Yogi. You can also find him on Instagram at Grappling for Yoga, or Yoga for Grapplers, I'm sorry. And so just always kind of wanted to talk to you, get a little more in depth about, what you do. And one day I'll get over and take a class. I know Hannette comes over and takes classes with you,
Mm,
and she always sings your praises and all the good things about yoga. But I think a lot of more people are kind of getting more into jujitsu, yoga, more of health conscious kind of things, especially, with first responders. I've seen it a lot too. And a lot of people kind of don't know where to start and what to do. And I think yoga is one of the great things you could start with. And like we talked about before, like, you're kind of surprised that people would be intimidated by it. But I think it's like anything else, starting something new. You're the new person, you don't know it, and you feel awkward kind of trying it out. But, everybody has to start there. And, everybody has a first day of doing it. And, but the benefits are definitely well worth it. And, I always like talking to you. And, on Saturday mornings, I'll be there tomorrow morning for no gi. Are you going to be there?
yeah, I should be there.
Yeah. So Jim usually runs the stretches in the beginning of class, and it's always a good stretch. We get a little bit of yoga on Saturday morning before our Saturday morning no gi class. So
Yep.
yeah. So it was
All right.
great talking to you, Jim, and look forward to seeing you. And check out Jim Bennitt at Tejas Yoga Chicago.
Thanks, JT. Good to talk
Yeah.
to you, buddy.
Good to talk to you. Thank you. Appreciate it.